All right, my name is Greg, and today I'm going to be talking about comparative religion in compulsory education. This is an important issue to me for two reasons. Firstly, because I'm a teacher. I have a stake in public education and the project of nation building within that ideology. And secondly, and more importantly, because I'm a father and I have a real stake in what Canada looks like in the future and what kind of a world my son is going to grow up in. So for those two reasons, I think I really do feel strongly that comparative religion is something we do need in schools, and hopefully I can convince you of that. So I think it's fair to say that in today's media and in the public discourse, there are a lot of mixed messages about what actually constitutes religion and whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing and what we even mean. When we're talking about religion, if you turn on the television, you're likely to see a news story about ISIS. You're likely to see a news story about some kind of Christian fundamentalist group, such as the Westboro Baptist Church. You might hear a news story about a male prostitution ring being run out of the Vatican. Whatever it is, you have a lot of times sensational, really negative representations of religious groups. And on the same news channels, you're going to see within the same half hour a representative of any one of those groups claiming that no, in fact, their religion is one of peace and tolerance. With that being the information we have available to us, with no solid grounding in the actual facts surrounding religions, it's very difficult to see how we could possibly create an environment of tolerance and respect ourselves. So my solution to that is that in high school, students would have comparative religion as a component of their education, and hopefully through that we will be able to promote those Canadian values of tolerance and religious respect, while also arming students with the critical thinking and self-reflective capacities to be able to evaluate all the positive aspects of religion as well as the negative ones and make healthy choices for themselves. So what I'm going to do now is lay out for you the legal and philosophical justification for comparative religion in education. Then I'm going to sort of define more clearly what I mean by it and address some of the challenges against it, which have been made in the past. And then I will wrap up by explaining how not only does this benefit students, but it also benefits teachers and works towards creating a safer and more respectful classroom environment for everybody. So I want to start out by reading to you from the British Columbia School Act's mandate for the school system. And it goes as follows. Continued progress towards our social and economic goals as a province depends upon, listen to this, well-educated people who have the ability to think clearly and critically, and to adapt to change. Progress towards these goals also depends on educated citizens who accept the tolerant and multifaceted nature of Canadian society. There it is, right there, in the mandate for public education in BC. This is why we are educating people, among other reasons, is to produce educated citizens who accept the tolerant and multifaceted nature of Canadian society. And while we're thinking about that, I want to read you one more quote, and this is from the 2008 Supreme Court decision on a case where two families in Quebec challenged the right of schools to teach their children comparative religion. And not only was that challenge rejected, but Madame Justice Marie Deschamps wrote in her ruling that the early exposure of children to realities that differ from those in their immediate families is a fact of life in society. The suggestion, and this is a serious, serious statement, the suggestion that exposing children to a variety of religious facts in itself infringes on their religious freedom or that of their parents amounts to a rejection of the multicultural reality of Canadian society. You can't get any clearer than that. So you have the BC School Act mandate and the Supreme Court of Canada both backing up the notion that the reason we are educating people is to promote Canadian values of tolerance, pluralism, and that the teaching of comparative religion in public schools, in compulsory education, is absolutely a part of that project and is backed up by the highest court in the land. So, having established that, I think before we go any further, I should make clear exactly what I mean by comparative religion and clarify in opposition to other types of religious education you might find. So, to my way of thinking, there are 4 separate ways that religious education can take place within a school system. You have one in which all religions, or a broad section of religions, are represented as close to free of bias as possible, in the sense that no one is given particular preferential treatment. They might receive greater attention due to historical context, but in terms of the validity of their claims and their rightness, if we can use that word, no one would be given particular precedence. The second looks very similar, except for it's the kind of comparative religion that you would see in a religious school, where you are still looking at a broad range of religious traditions, but you're looking at them through the lens of whatever denomination the school particularly adheres to. The third kind would be one in which the religious education taking place is an examination of one particular religion. So you're looking at the philosophy surrounding a religion, you're looking at the history and the basically you're doing theology at this point and traditional study. And then the final one that I would draw a distinction of would be an actual study of the performance of the rights and prohibitions. And you could call this one catechesis. This is learning how to be a good member of said religion. So you can see out of those 4, it is only the first one, the instruction on various religious traditions from a neutral standpoint, a value judgment neutral approach, which is consistent with the project of educating people for pluralism and educating people for religious tolerance and understanding. In terms of challenges to the project of comparative religion in public education, the biggest one is the notion that teaching about religions as if they were equal infringes on the parents' and the child's right to religious freedom, in the sense that being exposed to even just facts about other world religions can erode the specialness of their own religion and make it seem like it's just equal to all the other ones. The Supreme Court ruling that I mentioned earlier put that pretty solidly to bed, and even took the extra step of saying that holding these kind of views that are exclusionary and that favor ignorance and insular thinking are in direct opposition to the Canadian notions of multiculturalism and pluralism. On the contrary, I think it's fair to say that if we view parents not as owners of children, but as stewards, then it is in fact imperative that parents provide their children with the best possible information and the skills necessary to make good choices, rather than enforcing ignorance on them. And to those people in broader society who would say no, we have a moral obligation under the Charter, under the Freedom of Religion Clause, to entertain these kinds of philosophies. I would say I disagree. I think that tolerance of intolerant worldviews is not pluralism. It's in fact moral cowardice and relativism. And there is no place for that in a respectful, critical thinking nation. Another concern, and I think this is a valid one, much more so than the first one, is that once you get onto the topic of religion and you are having philosophical discussions, the nature of the discussion could get into the area of theology, epistemology, and other things which do not actually pertain directly to the practices and beliefs of religions so much as philosophy. And on those grounds, I think that could be troubling for students. I think at a higher level or in an elective class, that would be a fantastic topic to explore. But I think it would be possible to present in a fair and accurate way facts about religions without getting into those philosophical underpinnings in a way that would threaten anybody's worldview. And finally, the third one I want to address is the risk of essentialism, basically trying to identify the central traits of any cultural or religious or any other kind of group in such a way that you acknowledge the difference rather than presenting a single particular image of what that would look like. So I think this really just comes down to being very mindful and being open with students that the representations presented do not cover all individuals, and there is in fact a case to be made that there are as many conceptions of religion as there are people who have religious convictions. So this is just painting the broad strokes and the most common representations. And I think as long as we are aware of that and make a strong effort to represent that clearly to students, then it's the solution is in dialogue, and the solution is in honesty and not making generalized claims and not being able to back them up. So we've looked at the theory behind it, and we've looked at what some of the concerns around it are. And I guess the question now is, well, that this is all well and good in a theoretical sense, but what practical value does it have? Why go to the effort of including this in curriculum if, in fact, teachers and students are already addressing it in an informal way? And I think the solution lies in two separate camps. Firstly, for students, having it collected together and creating a safe space to discuss questions around religion and to explore their own practices and the practices and beliefs of others in a conscious way, in a premeditated way, rather than reacting to stimuli such as news stories or historical events to kind of provide an access to these discussions. I think really just allows students to have a more well-rounded and healthier relationship with religion. And the second part, the value to teachers, is basically creating a safe space for them as well, in the sense that having it codified in curriculum would mean that they are no longer personally carrying the responsibility not only for researching and providing those accurate facts that they may be dependent on, but also bearing the personal responsibility if there are parents who disagree with the delivery of the curriculum or have concerns about the way it's being taught. That, of course, these should be addressed in a prompt and respectful manner, but it no longer falls on the shoulders of the teacher and their personal judgment what to include and exclude for any given grade level, and also that they do have authorization, for lack of a better word, to discuss this and a space within which to do it. So I hope that is a good enough explanation for why we need this, why if we do intend to have a Canada which promotes values of tolerance and promotes our concept of a cultural mosaic and respects the diversity of beliefs and practices that we have within our population, that we need this to be an issue that's dealt with in schools, and we need this to be an issue which is dealt with openly and honestly, and can hopefully lead to better understanding and more dialogue and healthier relationships between communities. And that's the ideal goal that I'm working for the Canada that my son grows up in. So thanks for your time.